Welcome to Us at the Creative Zone with your host, Nanny Richards.
Mate, it's good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Actually feels like it's been a while.
I know, it has done. It's really weird.
Yeah,
I suppose it's been like
it's only been a few months,
weeks?
but like a lot can happen in the COVID days. I said to you, can you give me like a 30-second snapshot of like who you are and what you do and that kind of thing? So I don't know if you've managed to like get that down in a rough format, but mate, here's your chance if you want.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm Will Bertram. I work in Jersey as a freelance artist and illustrator. I'm currently working at Durrell Wildlife Conservation Trust as junior graphic designer. But my work seems to mainly focus around kind of iconography, space, mythology. There's a lot of nature-based work at the moment and landscapes, which I think is something to do with lockdown. But just a big old mixture of drawing and
yeah. I think that's why all those subject matters are why I'm drawn to your work. Actually, they all kind of they all resonate. So yeah, just to give, hopefully we're going to put like a link and maybe a link to your website and like social media and stuff at the end of this if you want. But for anyone who doesn't click on that, who's stupid and doesn't click on it, here's a good example of some of Will's work here. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see that there?
It's an old one now.
Yeah, I know it's an old one, but it's still got that kind of like Seekers kind of vibe to it in terms of like someone seeking the universe. I love the kind of like kind of play on the realities there of the two worlds almost.
I was like the blend of time and sort of what's inhabiting the space of whatever I'm drawing.
Yeah, no, I love that. And hopefully we'll go a bit like deeper into that as we go along, if that's all right. But I thought as a kind of like making practice now, I was going back like as early as you want to go back, I guess, really. But I'm just wondering whether like at school you showed any kind of like arty inclinations. I'm guessing you must have done. Have you always been like a visual kid and person?
Yeah, it's a funny one. Like I don't think my parents have really spoken about me being particularly creative in like nursery and stuff like that. Like, one of my earliest nursery memories is doing hand painting of autumn leaves, which I think every kid does at some point.
Yeah, that's always a good one.
It's actually weird. It was thinking about this question earlier, it made me remember that, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a nice one.
Yeah.
But but I was always kind of more on the creative side. I remember winning like a little book day prize in primary school to do with drawing my favorite book, and it's always kind of been there.
Yeah, what book was that? Do you remember?
I think it was something about a Viking coming. It's like people who lived in a B&B, but a Viking came to stay and ended up befriending them and living there. But it was a really cool book cover.
Okay, cool. Are you drawn to like the playful side of stuff? Because I don't know whether it's a good way of describing your work, but I see it as you have like a childlike playfulness, I find, which I think is a good quality to have.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of the subjects I tend to deal with can be quite serious. Like I do a lot of work about like cults and stuff like that. So I always try to kind of cut through that with quite playful visuals. So even if it's a serious topic, there might be even like one little detail that just kind of lets people know that it's not sinister. It's more of a commentary with like like with my own take on a commentary rather than trying to be like preachy about stuff like that. And
so you're still getting the message across, but not in a kind of ramming it down your throat type of way, and preachy way, like you say.
Yeah, I don't think they're ever meant to be like judgmental. It's meant to be more of a like just commentary. A slice of things that go on, and I think humor is the best way to show any kind of commentary.
Yeah, I agree. So. Did you get that kind of stuff from like cartoons and like comic books and stuff you saw on TV? Because like you're saying, you've got a lot of almost popular culture references in your work.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when I was younger, like I used to read the Beano and Dandy, like most kind of British kids, I guess. Like it's kind of a big thing, and I'd like redraw the characters, and I'd draw like characters from games I was playing, and things like that. But I actually got really big into Warhammer for a while, and like model making. I did the whole Airfix thing, but it was really Warhammer and the fantasy element that I stuck with. And it's only really recently I've thought about it because one of my good friends has started getting back into it, and I've been incredibly jealous of him. seeing him paint these goblins. Well, that's it.
Spend hours and hours. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah. But you know, like, I got really good at painting the really fine detail. And I think that is where my love for detailed illustration and just creating something detailed comes from. I mean, that, you know, it's probably just kind of assuming, but yeah, I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah, and like you said, there's also I think there's also that like kind of playfulness and imaginative creativity that comes from your work. Or that's what I see anyway. So did you have any like any influences, like as you were kind of like, I don't know whether it's A level now age or anything like that, that kind of led you to what kind of made you find your style is basically what I'm saying.
I've always drawn, like, regardless if it was good or not, or like the same style I'm working now. But I got really big into graphic novels, sort of like maybe like 16, 17, which is like end of GCSE, start of A level.
And what kind of titles did you have?
So it started off with, I think I bought like Daredevil, one of the really, really brutal, dark Daredevil compendiums that's sort of like that thick.
Okay.
And it dealt with like his girlfriend getting AIDS and like Bullseye. So like murdering his mum and all this stuff.
Layers and layers. Heavy. Yeah, layers and layers.
Yeah. And I just never expected it from a comic book, and it blew my mind. And I got really deep in Daredevil, and like just the idea of there being this blind superhero with like heightened senses. I just found that so intriguing. Yeah, but that was kind of the kickoff, because he used to be penned by, I want to say Frank Miller, but I don't think it is. It's definitely a contemporary of Frank Miller.
Okay.
That used to do like watercolor, expressive ink work, really like contrasting but beautiful. You know, a bit of collage in there. It was like a real amalgamation of styles, and that's what kind of set it off.
Yeah, I mean, I find that's what you've got as well. You're not like a one-trick pony, so to speak. You create in many different mediums. So I'm guessing you must have done art at GCSE, and again, obviously you did it at A level. Then you ended up with a degree in, what was your degree?
So I started my degree at Highlands after I left A level, which was, it was like it was a part-time course. So it kind of like, it took 4 years rather than 2 to do the first 2 years of a degree.
Okay.
And then I sort of took a year out, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we're going to bring it back and forward, so don't worry.
Yeah. And so I went back and I ended up, rather than doing illustration, which is kind of the go-to describing word I use for my work.
Yeah.
I went and did a fine art degree.
Okay, yeah.
Instead, I've always felt like the background of my work and the influences are very fine art influenced rather than kind of contemporary art. So it felt like the right thing to do. Again,
I think I want to kind of explore this a little bit later on and not delve into it just yet. Was it easy for you to choose art as an A level and for a GCSE? Because perhaps did you have the support of your parents in that respect? Because I know some kids perhaps they wouldn't necessarily think to choose art. I did choose art, but it was always there was almost a sneeriness about it in some ways, like that's not going to get you a proper job almost.
Yeah.
But I think the times have changed, obviously. Nowadays, more digital but yeah.
My parents were always really good, actually. They've always been really supportive. I mean, they're both from finance backgrounds. Both of them have been in that background purely because of the kind of benefit that brings in the long run. So they've always thought about their future with their job. And I think for them, maybe took them the odd little blip where they were like, don't know if it'll be the right fit, but they were certainly never negative. It was always like, pursue it for now, see how you feel, which is the best way for me. And, I think in a way it's probably like somewhat escapism too, because they've always been finance and office workers. It was almost that like, oh, wow, okay, he wants to do something really different. And they very quickly got on board with that.
That's good.
I wouldn't say school was particularly supportive of it. Like, one teacher kind of was at A level, but I just didn't go to the right school for art. So I think that's where the only pushback came. It was more the school telling them it wasn't a good idea rather than them,
Yeah, that can be a bit awkward. I imagine if you were a kid getting told that, like obviously you ignored it and did it anyway, but yeah, it's not ideal to be told that, really.
No,
there's just as much there's just as much value in art, and I think again we're going to come on to it later. Particularly during the COVID kind of situation, there's been a lot of, especially at the beginning, there was so much kind of art initiatives and artists giving away stuff for free, and I don't know, it's just really like a positive kind of moment from it. Anyway, your work contains a lot of kind of like motifs, I find. Is that a fair word to use? And how did you come to settle upon the things you settled upon? Because like more recently, you've done a lot of work with bees, and I love bees. I'm a I love taking photos of bees. My daughter's loves the garden, and so we're always looking out for the bees and the flowers and stuff. So I love the bees, love space. How did you decide to choose those particular kind of themes, and what drew you to those particular themes?
A lot of it kind of always depends on what I've been reading in my spare time, and like, I used to base a lot of my influence on like TV I was watching or films I watched. So, certainly at first, and a lot of it at beginning as well was like music. So like an album I'd want to replicate that style. But like more recently, it's just kind of, I think I've been more physically in nature the last year or so.
Yeah.
And that's had like a really big effect on where I want the work to go. And I've always found the idea of making artwork in nature really good, but just I've kind of moved that to one side for now and just been drawing it however I can.
Yeah.
But I kind of just, it sounds weird, but I think it comes through phases that I am into at the moment, at that present time. So I think if you probably look back over my work, it would almost probably be a diary or like a kind of mind map of what I've been interested in.
Yeah, well, I did actually have a look at your Instagram page the other day and went all the way back, and you're like a prolific poster, so that was quite a bit of scrolling to get down there. And but you're right, it was like a scrapbook, or like through time almost. It was actually really cool to see how you have progressed. But it still seemed, even at the beginning, you still seem to have that kind of theme, but you've obviously developed it since.
It all depends on the context of what the project is as well. Like at the moment, I'm doing a drawing challenge from a illustration company I used to follow in Bristol called Shake Bristol.
Okay.
And they do a yearly one called Shake Timber, which is what actually started me on doing drawing challenges myself.
Right.
And I find with them I have a lot more fun. They're not works of art, they're quick drawings that you do once a day.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of fun with it. I've been drawing I've been using it as a bit of a break from my usual seriousness and tagging celebrities in them, and I'm going full, just as like a bit of an experiment, I guess, going full commercial with them, and it's been really fun.
Well, sometimes it's nice to just give different stuff a go. I know that's partly why I'm doing this, but I think, and particularly because again, the COVID kind of situation makes you think, if you want to give stuff a go, you just got to try, haven't you? And you never know, you've got to try different styles if it's in your head. And sometimes you've got to get the commercial work when you can as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the end of the day as well, with Instagram, it's just likes and followers. It's all virtual, so worst comes to worst, you lose a few followers.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't written that down.
Deal.
I haven't written that down, but it's interesting you bring that up because in a way, it's a tricky one, the whole kind of social media side of things. I find anyway, I can be quite prolific for a few months or something, and then I just totally drop off the radar. So I find it hard to maintain. And how important is it for you as an artist to get? So I suppose, is it important? Do you get much work from it? And how would you advise other like younger artists kind of coming up, and what best way to use it, I guess?
I find for me, I started off strong on it, and I started off really trying to use it as a commercial platform, or a platform that I thought would lead to bigger things. And then from that, it kind of became more of a diary for myself about what I was working on. So particularly when I was at uni, I found it really helpful because it was a good time. It was almost a way of sketchbooking and keeping a journal of your work without the formality. So rather than having to write, oh, this led to this, blah, 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 you can just scroll back and see it all. And I quite often did that for my assessments and things like that. But I mean, I've got to admit, since kind of lockdown and the different things I've been doing, instead of necessarily drawing all the time, and I've kind of realized that, it can lead to a lot of extra pressure if you think you've got to post all the time.
Yeah.
I think that is something people need to remind themselves, that at the end of the day, it is all just little symbols on a screen. So
is that just pixels?
Yeah, so if you should certainly not worry about your following, worry about the likes you're getting.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as you start worrying about that, it's then not for you anymore, which changes the game. And I mean, I say all this, but at the same time, I do get the day where I'll be like, oh no, that one's only got 15, but the other one got 40. What is different? And
I definitely feel that was, you're describing me at the beginning when I was posting photos and everything, and thinking like, not only do you have to post every day, but ideally each one's got to be better than the last one you've done.
Yeah.
And how do you measure that? Is it something that's just in your mind, or is it again on the likes and the comments and the
that's it. It all depends what you want from it. I think if you go into art to make other people happy, then Instagram is a great tool. But it can also be really detrimental because it can give you that anxiety of it can make you feel as if you're not achieving anything, when actually probably the days you're not posting and the work is random. You might do 10 pages in a sketchbook of just scribbles,
Yeah, but
and it
that's still
might actually
valuable.
be more worthwhile
Yeah.
than like the really refined illustration that I post, you know? So
Yeah,
it's
who knows?
swings and roundabouts. You just
Yeah.
got to use it for what you want and remember to dip off if you need to.
Just go back to uni just a second. Sorry. What was your like main project, and what were you most proud of, the work that you did at uni?
The most the thing that I was most proud of when I went to uni, because I went late, I went as like an older person, so I don't really consider the course I did at Highlands Uni. I just consider that 1 year
Yeah.
where it became a degree as like the uni year because I was away and everything like that. But the thing that I was most proud of actually was not drawing for a year. You know,
Okay.
like I didn't really draw for the whole year. I really tried to not do illustration, not do my usual. I sort of reinvented my work for the year.
Yeah, that's what I
Of
mean about you use so many different mediums now. It's hard to kind of
yeah,
pin you down, I find. So
at the moment not so much, just because I'm going for like kind of what's easiest to suit my other routines, which
mhm.
I'm finding really satisfying.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, yeah, like I was just so proud that rather than going for a pen, I'd go for like a jigsaw and cut a shape out of a piece of wood,
Mm.
or you know, I'd just write something in a book, and that might be the only thing I do in the sketchbook for a day. And I got really deep into the dissertation stuff, and it made me realize like I really like the academic side of art as well as the kind
That's
of
cool.
the making. And actually, one thing that I've always kind of joked about that I always joke that I'm not a typical artist because I love organization. I love organizing a project. I love like the managing of your time in an artist
Well,
scenario.
that's a valuable thing to have, especially when you are kind of looking for work and being like a freelancer, which I know you have been at times.
Yeah, love a
Haven't.
spreadsheet.
Yeah, well, I can't say I'm like that, to be honest. Definitely not. So I was actually going to mention your exhibitions. You do some kind of pretty cool exhibitions at uni as well, and it must be nice to be able to show your work off in that way, and that using those spaces.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely nice, like just showing your work in a different place as well.
Hmm.
You know, a lot of my work has always been Jersey based, and you kind of end up with like, which isn't a bad thing. You end up with a very strong but familiar following.
Yeah,
So it may be your friends and family, then some people that just really like your work and follow you.
yeah,
But it's actually really lovely when you get the same kind of reaction from people that you've never met in a space that you've never exhibited in.
yeah. That's
And
cool.
I think that for me was kind of, it was just that reminder that even if to me I'm not doing anything that feels very original or doesn't feel like my normal work, it was just nice that there was still that reaction of like kind of wonder.
Confirmation that you're doing something right from, like you
Yeah,
say,
like
someone who doesn't necessarily owe you that, like in terms of your friends or your family.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I don't think it was necessarily the confirmation. It was just the I kept getting this reaction of like wonder,
Oh,
and
that's
that became a big word of my ear. Where it
yeah.
was like, it wasn't necessarily that they were like, this is amazing. It's just more that like, wow, this like makes me feel weird, or like,
Mm.
I
I
love
think
that
your
kind of.
use of night skies and the universe and things like that, that does kind of to me anyway, when I see something like that, it automatically makes you kind of like wonder, and especially the way you
Mhm.
incorporate things like that in, you kind of do it unusually. It's not obvious.
I do like a good night sky texture.
Yeah, yeah, it's beautiful.
I've kind of come round to the word romantic as well for a lot of my drawings. Like I never used to consider them that way, but I think with the lockdown thing
Mm.
and seeing how like just awful the world is in some places at the moment,
Yeah,
I kind of like now that my work has almost become these romantic bubbles of my interpretation of the world. And
little bits of positivity going out
yeah,
somehow.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose like you said about the childlike thing, it's almost
Mm.
like looking at it through a child's eyes of like
Exactly.
look at this, like trying to look on the positive side of it and the playful side of it
Yeah.
rather than kind of we're all going to hell kind of vibe.
Yeah, exactly, because it's too easy to do when the news is on
Yeah,
a
yeah,
constant cycle.
yeah.
So let's go to kind of what you've been doing during COVID, actually, if you don't mind, because
Oh,
um, you did, well, specifically what I mean by that is that, so the 19-day drawing challenge that you set up,
yeah.
which I still haven't actually finished. I've got two more to do, but it was really
Whenever.
nice. It was nice to have that to do when we had so much time on our hands, and there's something therapeutic and kind of almost like healing about art. I think
Mm.
in some ways, kind of like calms you down. Well, I found it was like a nice time to calm down and just focus on doodling or creating something.
Yeah, I mean I think that was very much like kind of the right time in the right place. Like I kind of mentioned it. I just bumped into one of the people from Art House and said that I was thinking of doing it with a friend. And then like a few days later they emailed me and were sort of like, we'd like to sort of manage it with you. So it was just really like good timing, and I think they caught the wave of that early. It was when everyone was still doing the whole, we want to make the most of it, we want to blah blah blah, and it was before kind of that had worn off, and it was before, because towards the end of it did get a little bit where some people were sort of like, all right, I'm kind of a bit, I don't want to feel the pressure of having to do something.
Yeah.
So the 19 days was the perfect amount of time, because it wasn't quite long enough where people get tired and sick of it, but it was long enough to capture that initial, almost like knee-jerk reaction that everyone had to all the different stuff going on.
It's funny that in times of like trials and tribulations, some people are drawn to just like creating. It's weird. I've certainly felt like that.
See, I'm actually not. Like, I find like in times like that, I'm almost like I don't want to draw. Like, and there'd be some of the prompts that I had made that I would look at and go, oh, like that's gonna be a nightmare. And it was just it was really lovely, and I think it just gave it. I think it meant more to people than I realized at first, because I did actually get a few people give me feedback where they were like, it really helped me through that first few weeks, or even just little things where they'd be like, it was fun to look at it in a humorous way, or, I think it gave people a lot of scope to let the situation permeate.
Like I briefly said before, the way that you do, if you have got the news on a constant cycle, then it's a lot of like negative and dark and like pretty doom and gloom stuff, and I guess there's truth to some of it, but I don't know, that's not all the world is, and that's what you're basically reminding people, I think.
I think that's it, and I think I was hoping as well, like for me personally, it just helped me cut through the shit. Like it helped me just cut through that awful sludge that was permeating at the start, where it was like, you'd have the commentary from one country, from another, like rising tolls and all that. And I think we've obviously been really lucky in Jersey situation, but I think it just helped kind of make that a bit easier at the start. And
well, no, like I said, certainly for me it did, and I saw you seem to have like a good amount of feedback and people participating as well, for like all different ages, all different styles. That must have been quite nice to see the work coming in.
It was amazing. I mean, I certainly, like, not that I can think of anyway, I've never seen anything be picked up so quickly in Jersey to that extent. I mean, I know social media helps a lot, and it was very visual, social media based, and it was like, like we said, right time, people had more time on their hands, some people weren't working. But yeah, I mean, I think it was 1,500 responses by the end of it. And for me, that's 1,500 new pieces of artwork that were made, regardless of the skill level of the people doing it, the commitment, whether they've carried on. It's just cool that came about so early on in it all. And
I think it was definitely a good positive when people were looking for a way to kind of raise their spirits. So I think you did a really good job. And
fun.
So as well as doing that type of stuff, so just prior to that, I'm wondering what year it was now, but the Go Wild Gorilla campaign. So was that a couple of years ago now?
That was actually just 2019. It actually ended in November 2019.
It seems like it's been on for longer almost.
Yeah, well, that's time is a bit of an enigma at the moment. Yeah,
definitely. So where you seem to be an instrumental part of that, and obviously we kind of get to like the money you guys raised a bit later on, which was incredible as well. So where did the idea come from, and what was your part in that? And just talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So I was working with one of the sort of senior team members on the project. That she'd kind of she works as a fundraiser for other charities, and I was working with her with an event that she puts on, and she'd mentioned it a few times. We're looking for this role in this project, Go Wild Gorillas, and another artist that we've actually both exhibited with, Ben Robertson. He did the first gorilla, so I'd had sneak peeks of this gorilla, and I was like, I saw like I want to get on this.
Yeah,
and I was just, my biggest concern, I was like, I just want to do one of the gorillas, and at the time I didn't know anything of the project, I didn't know the kind of structure of it, and then I chatted to this fundraiser about it, and she was saying that Durrell were working with a company called Wild and Art that some people may recognise. They've done these sculpture trails across the UK.
Yeah.
You commit to the amount of sculptures, then you commission artists, and I've got to admit, when I first heard it, I was like, I don't care about that. I just want to do a gorilla. And then actually, I went to, I think we had chatted about me being artist coordinator for the project, and it's a fancy sounding
Yeah,
title.
nice, very nice title.
My ego had a bit of a like, oh yeah, that sounds fancy, that'd be cool.
Massage.
Yeah. And then I went to the launch night and was hooked. I did a kind of one of the little gorillas. They had big, small,
Yeah.
and I did a small one just for people to color in on the launch night, and I was just hooked by the energy that everyone had. Like when they seen
amazing.
Benny's gorilla, they seen the first one, and people were hooked straight away.
Yes.
So I kind of committed there and then to be artist coordinator, which meant I had to manage the selection process. So we did an open call where artists sent them in, and I kind of managed that. But at the time, I think it would go a lot smoother if we did it again, because at the time, I don't think Jersey really knew what we were looking for in terms of quality of a submission.
Yeah, I get it.
So some of them were absolutely incredible, and you could straight away see what they were going for. But others were kind of like, you could tell it was almost they'd gone, oh no, I forgot to do it. Quickly jot it down. And the problem is with the type of project it is, you've got to be fair. So if you can't imagine it from the submission, you can't necessarily commit.
Back it, yeah.
Yeah, because
how many did you have overall? Sorry.
So we had 40 big gorillas.
Yeah.
And two little ones that were part of the big trail.
Okay.
And then on top of that, there were 42 other little ones that were sponsored, that were created by sort of community groups, other charities, schools, just to get young people involved as well.
No, it's a really good idea. And so if you want to just explain briefly again what it was actually for, what was the idea? So you were looking to raise, did you always have the auction in mind, I guess, actually?
Yeah, so part of the Wild in Art structure, they give it to you as it's basically like they give you the structure of the project and say, put your spin on it.
Okay.
And it just so happens Durrell did it really, really well. So Durrell did it to celebrate their 60th anniversary and to raise money for a new gorilla enclosure. Just the one they've got at the moment, the outdoor bit's absolutely lovely, but the indoor bit is a bit too small for them now.
Yeah, he's a big boy, that Badongo, and I'm
not well, they've just had a baby.
He needs space.
Space,
we all need outside space.
Yeah, and the outside's great, but it's just that indoor's a bit dated now, and they were saying I think it was built in like the 80s or something. So
That's it. I can't ever remember anything else there.
I know, neither can I. So it was just, it was a nice amalgamation of the right ideas coming together to make a project that people could get behind. And for Durrell, I mean, obviously anyone in Jersey will know they're always trying to get people in the zoo.
Yeah.
So I think they wanted to do something different that actually allowed people to enjoy the zoo.
But not necessarily be, exactly. That's a great idea.
It was almost, I know it was to raise money, but I think it was almost treated as a bit of a thank you to the island as well, that you could be like, well, you've supported us for so long, so here's something that you can do out of the zoo. It's free of charge. You paid like $1.99 for the app, but that was the only expense unless you decided to then come to the zoo or do any of the events around it. So
well, I know my daughter loved it, and she was constantly being taken out by her gran and her 9. And how many people did you get involved? Do you have figures for anything like that? Or?
So I think within the first 2 months we got 100,000 unlocks on the app, which meant that 100,000 people had put in a code for a gorilla via the app. And by the end of the thing, it was like, by the end of the project, I think we got to 250,000, which, for Wild and Art projects was still monumentally high. It was quite close to the Manchester Trail, the B auction, where which was like a monumental one for them.
Was that after the
Manchester bombings?
The Manchester bombings, yeah. So
it was when they had all the I Love MCR things, and like it really. I mean, to come even close to that, we never imagined it, but it was. I think the official app thing, we had like over 4,500 users or something. I'd have to check it, but I think it was close to that. That's probably incredible. More by the end. And like with all the figures Wild Nut have, that's still so high as far as uptake in the app goes.
Yeah.
But
it's a real community kind of project, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think it was just we caught it right. Where the summer, it was a good summer. People could be outside summer. People were looking for stuff to do, and obviously it's before COVID, so we still had tourists, and I mean, I think they did some surveying at the airport, and I think they did get some figures on how many of the tourists coming in were there just for the trail.
Really?
And it was something like 1 or 2% of tourists were just there for the thing.
That's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, crazy.
But really cool.
Yeah.
That's great. It was a great reaction.
Yeah,
So,
can't beat it. Like,
and so you're still at Durrell now, aren't you?
yeah. So luckily, off the back of it, I guess. Like, obviously, I spent a year working in their fundraising and comms.
Oh, and actually, sorry, that's the whole. Sorry,
Um,
the fundraising aspect was something I wanted to talk
oh
about as
yeah,
well.
yeah. Sure.
Forgot that.
The big reveal.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
big reveal. So that was a bit of an incredible night. So you streamed
Yeah.
that online as well on
Yeah.
Facebook, and that was remember watching that, and it was like each one you were got the kind of the heart going watching that.
Yeah, well, you can still actually watch it. So, if anyone wants to, it's still on the Durrell Facebook. But yeah, crazy night. Like, there's just so much electricity and tension in the room. Like, it's we had that Charles Hanson was
Yeah, he kept the crowd going, definitely.
Oh, he was incredible. But I mean, yeah, like when we were really hopeful that we'd get between 7 and 10 grand per gorilla.
Right.
And even then,
how many gorillas did you have overall? Again, sorry.
So for sale, I think it was 42 gorillas.
Right. Okay.
And the lowest any of them went for was 16 grand.
That's mental.
So like even then, it just blew all our minds. Like, I remember about a quarter of the way through, the CEO of Durrell was walking around in tears. You know,
really?
because you're like all of us had been quite cynical towards the end, where we were like, oh, it's been amazing, but don't get your hopes up too much.
You've got to kind of maybe say that.
Yeah,
at least,
yeah. Well, I think the average in the UK that they tend to go for is kind of between 5, 7. The higher end is sort of like 11, 12, 13 grand.
Yeah.
Very rarely they go for kind of over 20. I mean, it's definitely happened. And there's ones that have gone for insane amounts, but it's not common, No,
and the Jersey Sandman, his went for, was it 52?
Andy Coutanche, 72.
72, sorry.
Yeah. It broke every Wild and Art record.
Oh, really?
Which we actually broke the record twice because another gorilla went for like, I think 52 or 62.
Right, yeah.
First, the record had been 60 grand. So we beat it once and everyone was like mind blown. And then that one came up and it just, I remember like Andy had his mum from New Zealand there. And she just I loved watching them because she just turned into everybody in the world's like supportive mum.
Yeah,
and
that's amazing.
She came up to me after the auction and she was like, my boy just needs to put his work out there a bit more. He needs to keep pushing. And this is like a grown man who's just got £72,000 at auction, but it was just so lovely.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Like I said, there was kind of like a electricity and magic in the air, even just watching it online.
Yeah. I mean, I was very lucky that like not only was I involved in the organization, but I actually did a gorilla as well. So it was beautiful being part of the artist's journey as well as the kind of charity's journey. So I was so ingrained in the Durrell team, like I was so ingrained in that by the end of it. Still am now, but like it was just such a weird and amazing thing to be a part of.
Yeah.
And to be able to actually do a gorilla as well was
so it's an amazing opportunity that's kind of that you've made the most out of. And
for sure.
So it's led you to where you are currently still working as well.
Yeah, but that's it. Like, while we were there was often talk about them needing a assistant graphic designer, and it kind of, the question had been come up a few times. I kind of said, yeah, I'd definitely do it, like, but part-time, and it's really worked out where I'm now there sort of 3 days a week working on zoo graphic design, which is
perfect.
Amazing. Like, you can't beat working in a zoo. It's a dream.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm always a bit jealous of people. Well, I get to photograph a few weddings at the zoo sometimes, and also I've done some work for you guys. But yeah, whenever I see the people who work there permanently, I'm always a little bit jealous of that because it's just a beautiful place, isn't it? Just moving on a little bit, then, do you maintain like there's certain routines in your life? And I kind of know that there are when I say that because I know that you've been doing like fitness stuff with Jason and Ben and Sam. If you can maybe just talk to us a little bit about maybe that, and also any kind of like artistic routines that you kind of have on a whatever kind of regular basis.
So I would say like those guys are a bit more like, they're a bit more vetted in it than I am. Like, Sam is.
Yeah, well, like I dip in and out as well.
Yeah, I mean, Sam is like a pure athlete. Like he's another level. Like he really is a powerhouse of like energy and exercise. It's amazing. I'm fairly new to it, but I think it came from the meditation aspect. Like, they're all into their mindfulness and meditation, and it's something that I've wanted to do for ages. And as soon as I started doing that, it led to all these other habits. Actually, no, that's not true. It was Jason suggested doing 50 push-ups a day for a month, and then he upped the ante to 100, and I've just stuck with it, and it was kind of the catalyst for some positive change. And like this, I think what COVID has done is let me get further into that. So, you know, like I think it's been 6 weeks now, and I've been in the sea at least once every day.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
it's just glorious.
I
like
find the sea to be quite like healing, and
yes,
kind of washes away all the stresses, and you're just there in the sea. It makes you kind of very in the moment because you're freezing.
Well, I think that's it, and that's the meditation side of it too. Playing in is that like you've got to be present in that moment to. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like it depends the sea you're going in. It can be quite calm, and
it's not
quite,
very often your mind drifts when you're in the sea, though. You're
You know, I've been going to some more like rougher areas of sea lately, where like you really do have to be present and aware of your. And it's just a nice feeling, and I like, you know, I've committed now that I would like to be one of these guys that goes in every single day. You know, I want to be that like 8-year-old guy in his skimpies going down to Half Day Par at like 6 in the morning.
Yeah, no, my brother-in-law's dad is I think he's one of, they're called the polar bears, and they swim. So he's about like, he must be 70, I think, or roughly that age. He's in there every single day of the year, any temperature.
Well, that's what I'm hoping. Yeah. So like my routine at the moment, like, you know, I find it kickstart your day too. Like if the toughest thing that you do is going to be in the morning, you've started your day right.
Good advice.
That's something Jason said a few times where he's like,
I can hear a lot of Jason in what you're saying, but in a good way. Not he's on it, isn't he? So.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, like there's a few of other my friends there's two in particular that are really on all this stuff too, and it's weird because as soon as I think it's one of those unspoken things with a lot of these routines where people almost feel like they are being like a bit holier than thou when they talk about it. It can come across very like you should be doing this, and I think that's what's really lovely is there's no ego involved. So it's not like we're all competing. It's not like to prove something. It's literally just to be healthier.
Yeah,
and
it seems like everyone's encouraging each other to try.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, like from this, just mentioning it to a couple of my friends who I was friends with for years anyway. It's now like, oh right, well you do this too, like I do this, and you know, like one of them just this morning actually, like me and one of them have been round 3 different bays and gone for a quick dip.
Oh,
and,
nice.
You know,
why not when we live over here? It's beautiful, isn't it? So I'll make the most of it. Yeah. I'll get myself a bike soon, so hopefully I'm going to be able to go and see some more locations that I didn't know existed, because I'm sure there is some. Yeah,
well, we've been going to Grone. Do you know the pinnacle there, the big rock?
Yeah.
Huge rock with a dolmen.
People used to jump off that. Did people used to jump off that?
Interesting. So we've been trying to get more information about it because we've been going around the back bottom of it where there's some like rock pools and little lagoons. So like this morning we both went down there and we sat in like this little rock pool and let the tide just come in and go out, and it was so lovely.
Nice way to start the day.
Yeah. You never feel bad after going in the sea. There's one of the things like I will repeat that Jason says quite a lot is he got it from these 2 Irish lads, the happy pair, I think it is, Scottish or Irish lads.
Yeah, okay.
And they one of the things they said was they like the person that comes out the sea more than the person that goes in.
Oh, I get that for sure.
Yeah. It clears away like any stresses or like.
Yeah. You just feel, you're just refreshed as well, aren't you? There's not many better kind of positive slaps in the face than the sea.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing that you mentioned before, actually, that I was going to pick up on, which I'm interested to ask everyone who comes on really, is whether do you find that you're like willing to take risks in your work, and I guess in life as well a little bit. I'm just of the opinion that generally creative people are perhaps a little bit more that way inclined than someone who doesn't work in that creative field.
I think probably other people would think I take risks more than I do, if you know what I mean. Like I'm like I said before, like I love organization and stuff, so like I do tend to get quite sucked into having a routine, and you know, like at the moment I wouldn't say I'm taking many risks with my work. It's very much like drawing on the iPad, getting it printed, selling or framing the print, you know.
Yeah, and you found a routine that works.
And I mean, at least for now it's working, and you know, the risk taking will definitely come back when exhibitions start again. And I think for me, risk taking comes with context. So I definitely do take risks, but it has to be for the right context at the time. Yeah. Like at the moment, for me personally, I don't feel like there's any
need
rush,
for it. Yeah.
And you know, like any rush to kind of get into like conceptual work at the moment, and you know, stuff like that. I've kind of let this year be a year of just enjoying.
Yeah.
And you know,
I kind of identify that as well. I think there's sometimes like in a different way to you, but do like a variety of different styles. And sometimes you don't want to put the pressure on yourself necessarily to force yourself to produce work of a certain kind. That doesn't necessarily mean you won't come back to it at some point.
Yeah, for sure. And like, one of the things I've always really liked is my ability to kind of pick up and drop mediums. Like you've mentioned a few times that I work on many mediums, which for me actually at the moment I feel like I am a bit one trick pony, but it's not necessarily in a bad way. It's just I think contextually that is the nice thing to do at the moment. It's kind of the sustainable way to work at the moment is doing that with everything else I'm doing. Whereas, when you've got kind of a bit more time and maybe a space that is a bit more dedicated to work in, you can push those boundaries a bit. And I think sometimes the biggest risk as well can kind of be not pushing your boundaries, because obviously it is a risk in itself.
Getting comfortable and actually,
because you can get really comfortable and then end up not wanting to go back. And I think that for me is my biggest kind of the risk I'm taking at the moment, is getting a bit too comfortable. So.
Yeah, and just out of interest, slightly touching on that, do you, like living in Jersey, as we obviously do, we have quite a kind of like a small direct market, I guess, but when you're creating work, are you ever thinking about a specific Jersey market sometime, or are you thinking beyond that? And
it depends really. I don't really think of my work as location based. I mean, I have recently started drawing more like sort of accepting Jersey a bit more. I think my gut when I was younger was to always almost rebel against that, because we get a lot of landscape artists and a lot of monument artists. So, like everybody, there must be a version.
I mean, to be fair, there are some beautiful, there are some beautiful ones, but it is kind of like overdone.
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with it. Everyone can put their own style on it, and that's great. It's just for me, there'll always be, I might be like, well, because to me, I think of Corbière, I think of Ian Rolls. So that's not a bad thing at all. But then, like, for the cows, I think of Nick and stuff like that. You have these things where you're like, well, they've covered it. I don't need to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like a negative, like, I don't want to draw it because everyone's done it. It's more that, like,
you want to have your own voice.
To me,
perhaps?
It's been done. Yeah, to me, it's they've covered it. I don't need to work on it. And I think that's where Jersey can be quite stifling in some ways, because sort of everybody quite easily fits into their thing, or people think of people very easily as that's the guy that does this, or that's the artist who paints that. I mean, I've just done it then by saying Nick with cows, Steve with Corbière. Like it's an easy way to do it, but I think I've always rebelled against that. Whereas because I'm enjoying Jersey more this year, I'm letting it come into the work a bit more. And it's a nice feeling, At the end of the day,
we've been stuck here, haven't we? So it gives you an opportunity to actually slow down and appreciate what we have got.
For sure, I think the biggest gift I've been given in a long time has been, and it's happened a couple of times. I'm sure we'll get onto it, but like with my neck, it was the slowdown. The slowdown is what I really have been appreciating. And I say slowdown, but I'm busier than ever. But it's just not artistically, and that's lovely too. So
well, let's move on to that incident then that happened. How many years ago is that now?
So that was 2016.
Right, okay.
I was set to go to uni, to a somewhat awful college, somewhat awful town.
Where was that, sorry?
I probably shouldn't say the name of the town.
Okay, no worries, don't.
Nah,
don't worry.
It was only awful in terms of it wasn't right for me. I'm sure for some people it would have been lovely, but I was set to go to Camborne, which is like, I mean, I feel awful, but I can't even remember if it's Cornwall or Devon that it's in. But it's one of these old kind of like mining towns.
They'd have done good cider, probably.
Yeah, probably good pasties too. Probably really good pasties. But I was set to go to this college there that was sort of the direct link from Highlands to there.
Yeah.
And I went for the interview and was like, brave face, like whatever. Like I just need to get the degree. Don't really care. Blah blah blah. Very much convincing myself that I was happy with the decision. We even booked we managed to get a flat in Falmouth, which is where I'd be living. So then I'd have to commute, and it would have been a tough year. It would have been a really tough year to do the commute and everything like that. But I had a leaving due at, you've already mentioned him a couple of times, Jason's. And he very kindly let me have my leaving due in his studio.
So that was your leaving due? Shit, I forget.
Yeah, so I think it was literally like 4 or 5 days before I was meant to leave. Like all my friends are up there, some of his friends, big mixture, big celebration. Things got a bit leery. Like I wouldn't say it was crazy, but there were a few incidents that night where like obviously people got a bit too loose.
Yeah, that happens.
And, Yeah, and like I would say, like that's kind of the one thing about I don't like about this situation is that it was alcohol induced
Yeah.
in
No,
some. You know, I think that always puts a dampener on something that could just be looked at as a sort of accident. As soon
yeah.
as there's alcohol involved, there's almost that guilt, I think, that's associated with like, you know, doing something silly when you're drunk. Because I was gearing up to leave, I'd been a bit more loose with the partying and stuff like before that. So 2 weeks before it, I'd actually fallen off a camping chair and cracked my eyebrow on a bottle, and I had a cut under my eye like there. And the week before that, me and two friends were like messing around with another friend at a party at mine, and he, I like tripped backwards and I cracked my head on a door frame.
Well, mate, you're
So,
not.
you know,
Yeah, you're not giving yourself the best background there.
No, not at all. But I think it's important to the
Yeah,
story.
no, yeah.
We'd all joked about these things happen in threes, and
Oh, no.
you know, my mum was convinced it was because of I'd drawn a Ouija board a few years ago, and it had been in my shed before then, and I'd just sold it. And she was convinced that it's because the Ouija board was like attached to me now, and I'd
mums
sold.
Normally know best, but I don't know. Who knows?
No, you know, to me it was just pure unlucky. But you know, we made all these jokes about everything happens in threes, and I'd even said to a friend, he sent me the screenshot the next day, just saying, because I said, "Oh, I'll probably fall down the stairs and break my neck."
No, you didn't.
Yeah, I did. I sowed my own poison.
Mate.
So, you know, and then the next day, like, you know, in hospital, he sent me the screenshot of the message, and I was just like, oh my God, sowed my own poison. But basically, what happened is, just before we were leaving, I ran up the stairs to get my stuff, and a friend, like you know, he's my best friend. He still is now. It was no intention whatsoever. It was purely like silly boy behavior, you know, like young, like we sort of reverted to like kids almost than what we were playing. We were like grabbing stairs and, you know, we'd had a bit of like, I think a bit of a play fight and stuff like that. But he pulled my leg, and I think he thought I'd just do that thing where you kind of fall palms flat on the stairs. But for whatever reason, because
your weight was backwards or something, was it?
Well, I broke my thumb as well. So I think what happened was as I fell, I slipped on the step. Okay. So I think thumb went back and I kind of toppled, and I rolled down the stairs.
Oh, man.
So it's like, you know, like all I remember from it is like a hot pain, some flashing, and a hot, wet pain. And just kind of being like crumpled. Like it was just one of those unfortunate accidents. And I stood up afterwards, was like walking around afterwards, losing a lot of blood, which was the worry because I cut my head. And that was the worry. So they called the ambulance because I was kind of in and out of consciousness, bleeding a lot. And it was when the ambulance guy got there, he was like, have you got any other pains? And I said, oh, my neck hurts. And it all changed. You know, the whole vibe changed. They put me on one of those orange boards, one of those blocks.
Yeah.
Took me to the hospital, and they had to get the bleeding to slow down before being able to do an X-ray. But because I was like lying on my back, it was perfect for the wound to just keep bleeding.
Right. Okay. So it wouldn't stop.
So it was one of these like horrible. So like my girlfriend and my parents were there, and you know there was a point I remember they gave me a painkiller, and I was like, oh, I feel good, and then I was like, oh no, I feel sick.
Oh really?
And I had to be sick, and they had to like brace me up. But because they had to be careful just in case.
Yeah.
It was just the weirdest thing, but you know, it all worked out for the better, which is the weird kind of twist in all this, you know.
Yeah, it's not funny, but there's a few people who I've spoken to, will speak to, that you know, similar life-changing things like that. Well, seemingly life-changing things like that happen, but the kind of like power on through almost, and it almost reinvigorates you to do more and push on.
Yeah, well, that's it. You know, like I had the benefit of Jason's knowledge and experience during that time. You know, I was going up to his studio once or twice a week to chat with him. Like my mum would take me there, she'd drop me there, or sometimes she'd come in, and it was lovely. Like it really was lovely. Like I got time to read. I mean, I couldn't read at first because you know Jason's book collection, they're all very big. Yeah. He lent me a few books, and I couldn't lift them at first because of the pressure and everything. It was too much. It was making me really tired But you know, when I did get into the reading, I just read a lot of art books, watched a lot of good films. You know, I have a beautiful network of friends and family where like everybody was really supportive.
That's good. It's important.
They helped me through it, and I ended up going to a better uni than where I was meant to go, with a much more definite mind on what I wanted to do at uni. Because I did do an exhibition while my neck was broken.
Yeah, because I was going to say, didn't you? Some of your work is you in your neck brace. Was that done during or is that after?
That was during. So
Yeah.
I tried to stay positive and I tried to do a lot of like some funny stuff around it. So
Yeah.
I did that print of me and my sunglasses with it that has like a little constellation. It's actually the shape of the scar on my head,
Nice little
and it
double
just had the
reference.
little caption like the boy who kept bumping his head or something. You know, it was quite playful, and I quite like it as almost this mythology that is like. I mean, it sounds weird, but I do still get it now every so often where like I'll meet another artist that I haven't seen in years or haven't don't really know, and they know
Mm.
me, and they'll be like, "Oh, didn't you break your neck?" And it's like, yeah,
Um,
yeah, that was, which I don't really mind, but it is one of them where like I don't think anyone should be defined by,
no, of course not.
an accident, and I
No,
think,
of course not. I mean, I
yeah, I've
think
got to
so.
admit, even when I read that on this, when I read your notes and you kind of said you were mentioning it, I was really like, it's important, but I was like, I don't want to dwell on it,
No,
but then
no,
actually,
but I think
it
it's
is
important that
important,
yeah,
but
it is important. Could have
yeah,
easily stopped you in your tracks doing what you do, but it hasn't. And I think no matter what kind of art you're in, you'll always have those moments where you're like, oh, you lose a little bit of enthusiasm probably, and
yeah,
it's kind of
yeah.
like, if you've had a massive kind of a massive potential issue there, where you just kind of pushed on through, and that's what you got to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to admit, it's a funny one because I'd say I'm doing more now that probably would have helped me get through it even easier. Like, I've got to admit, I didn't. There were a few days where I was really down about it. It'd be like
Mm.
the odd day where you hadn't slept well, or maybe because at first I was on, I think, codeine
Right,
they
okay.
gave me. It was one of the whatever. It wasn't cocodamol, but it was a whatever.
Right.
And I hated it. It
Mm.
made my legs shaky, and then when my legs shook, it made me worry about my neck,
Right,
and it
okay.
made me clench my teeth a lot, and made me
Mm.
really. And I ended up just not. I was like, you know what? No, I'll just have paracetamol when I need it, but generally I'll just try to power through. So I think we worked out. I only took 3 of these pills over the whole
Well,
duration, and a lot of the time it was just 2 paracetamol every 4 hours, or not even that. I think it was actually just like 2 paracetamol twice a day I was doing to try to get through it because I really didn't want to get too into
dependent
the
on
pain.
it. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah, but yeah, it stopped me in my tracks, but I think it was actually a really good stop. Like it was like this COVID thing has been for me actually.
Yeah,
Like
so
it's
like you're
been that.
saying, give you a chance to slow down and think
Yeah,
about
I
things.
think I needed it. Like I didn't know how detrimental the cat going away to this other college could have been. So it can
Yeah,
only be.
and again,
Yeah.
like you're saying, kind of gives you a bit of a shift in perspective as well.
Yes, yeah, it shows you what's important too. Like,
Mm.
my girlfriend stuck by me. Like, I mean, I've even said to her, like, I don't know how well I would have been in that situation. Like, I feel like I would have been really awful. I'd have been like, oh, but Laura, I need to draw, like,
Yeah, that's
yeah, it should have
interesting.
been like, oh, drive me to the hospital, and I'd probably been like, oh, sorry, I need to draw, or like, I need to go do this, or, I've worried about that a little bit, that maybe I wouldn't have been
I've
as
always, yeah,
reciprocal in that, but, it really did help. And like my mum as well, like, and my dad, like both of them, they were just so amazing, you
yeah,
know.
that's important. Lucky you've got that kind of that network, but
Yeah,
yeah, lovely
yeah.
to have it.
And it shows what's important,
Yeah,
like all my friends were good and like all you guys as well. Like, I mean, Jason was amazing and like Benny and all that.
yeah,
So it really does make you realize what's important. And I think doing an exhibition while under that extra stress, it led to some really important, maybe not breakthroughs, but it just led to some, if it helped me figure out the stepping stones to a lot of the work that I'm still making.
okay,
So no matter how vague that might be now, the work that I did then and the mindset I was in then has really sort of been an underlying force, I think, within.
yeah, and that you've kind of built on top of.
Yeah, and even when I was at uni, like a lot of the work was almost a direct follow on from what I was doing when my neck was broken, and
Hmm.
maybe not in like a really obvious way, but
Was
yeah.
that quite the stories you tell yourself for yours or type of thing? So I think it's interesting to think about like the narrative that sometimes you can create.
Yeah, yeah, and that works both ways
Yeah,
as well.
exact course it does. But
Yeah, I mean that
you,
that is something that drives a lot of people's anxieties wild, and
mm,
makes people worry. I do that. I worry about what the narrative I've put on other people that I encounter. I'm like, oh God, I worry about that. But like, yeah, like I think at the time I didn't really think about any of these things. I was just like, well, I've just got to get on with it and stay positive.
yeah.
Um,
And so
I
how long did it take you to
uh,
like roughly get over that?
so it was two halves of 6 weeks. Because I don't know if they do it on purpose, but they told me it'd be 6 weeks,
Hmm.
and then we went back for a follow up, and then he showed me the X-ray, and yeah, it was still broken. Like it was still, you could see the crack still. And I
Yeah.
remember being terrified because literally the weekend before I'd been at a Halloween party taking mushrooms, so it was And that's what, it was my first experience of psychedelics, and I was like, I sort of like, what better time? You're in a neck brace, you're protected already, you're already in a bubble. Like the worst thing that could possibly happen to somebody, supposedly, one of the worst injuries you can get. You've already done it, so like you might as well just while you're in this good mind space, just get into it. But
yeah. And how was that mind journey?
I've got to admit, I had a lovely time. I just felt warm. I kept being like, I'm really proud of you, Will. You've done a really good job with all this neck thing. And I kept being like, you did an exhibition with a broken neck, and just feeling really warm. Like the best way to describe it is I felt golden. Like it was so nice. It was just lovely.
Like they were giving you a hug.
Yeah, yeah. And the same night, like loads of my friends were having freakouts because they took too many, and like, I was just like, I was in like a Donnie Darko skeleton onesie with like my neck brace on top, and like just having the best time.
If that's not the time to do them, then when is?
Yeah, man. I didn't know at the time, but like, yeah. I mean, I don't know if I get back into anything like that, but like, certainly for the time, then it was very. It almost was like a release of that. Like, you know what? Just be proud of yourself for a minute and think about what you've actually overcome.
Yeah.
In these few weeks, and think, and it made me like really like just but a nice introspective, not like a panicky like, oh god, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and I don't know. It was cool. I think it was good it happened, but when we were at the doctor and he showed me the crack, I was like,
shit.
Because I had actually been flashing the beard off quite a lot. That night I'd been like kind of
taking it off. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know,
a little
like,
bit too confident.
That I was like, I should not have done that, but yeah, it was fun.
Thankfully you're all right.
Yeah, yeah. It was a good time. Got a sweet beard out of it as well.
Mate, yeah, the beard is strong.
Yeah, it was like down to when I took the neck brace off, when I finally did get the okay. It was literally like Tom Hanks Castaway, like down here and like so scraggly everywhere, and it got this sweet point because of the way the neck brace goes.
Actually, really have you done a bit of artwork of that actually? Yeah, I think I can picture that.
I think so. Yeah, and actually, a photographer over here, another photographer, Danny
Evans.
Yeah. I always am like, wait, which one? He did a portrait of me in the neck brace wearing this like almost fake shearing sheep style jacket.
Okay. So,
and I look like a crazy like dictator. It's such an insane photo.
No, it's a bit like egotistic to have photos up on your wall of yourself, but I reckon that's one you probably should have.
I don't think I could. It's so far past that time now. It's lovely. It is actually nice to reminisce about the good things of it, but like, it still is one of those things. Like it's a bit of a touchy.
Yeah.
I don't know if it is. I don't know.
I guess it'll always be part of you. So it's a constant reminder to maybe a time that was. Now you can look back on it was not fondness, but you've learned something and it's come out better for it. But at the time, it obviously was hard.
Well, weirdly, I got really into The Martian, the film.
Okay.
And the idea of like colonizing Mars, it became like a bit of an obsession. I was like, I remember I was doing went down a bit of like an internet research wormhole on it all.
Yeah.
And funnily enough, like last year sometime on a long haul flight, I watched The Martian, and I ended up doing a drawing of like the bit where he's like looking at his first plant on Mars.
Okay, yeah.
I love that. Like it's so interesting.
Yeah.
But
do you think there's like a commonality of them over like the ages? Is this? Would you say throughout art? Do you find you see that? Because I think in some ways you do, but but just as an illustrator, it'd be interesting to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean certainly like the artists that I'm influenced by. One of the things I'm always influenced by is they're like they've almost developed these like almost tropes that they put in their paintings, or at least. It will be something that is recognizably them that is in every painting. Arguably, it's like one of the famous ones is Turner and his landscapes. There's certain things you look at in them that you would recognize in every Turner. Similarly, like Matisse and stuff like that. There's always those like the visual language you kind of create.
That's interesting because I was speaking to Jason a little while ago, and he was talking to me about almost creating like an alphabet. Your own alphabet that you kind of construct and deconstruct and mangle, merge together in different ways, but it's like that's your artistic language almost.
I think it's the thing a lot of artists try to do, and I don't know if it's even a conscious thing you try to do, but I think it's what happens if you're committed to like creating for so long. You're bound to have things that make it like noticeably yours.
Yeah, repetition in some way.
Like a really easy kind of example, I guess, is somebody like Francis Bacon, where it's kind of that fleshy colour, like quite vivid, visceral, kind of like drippy, grotesque, dark paintings, but with these like kind of really bold colours over the top. you look at some of his paintings and they're like completely horrible. Like if you took away maybe the bit of blue or yellow, you'd look at it and be like, that's just black and horrible. And
But it's just that use,
there's always those
that expert use.
tropes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's just the tropes that like draw you in, and I think those are the bits that make artwork. It's the little things that make it yours, and it almost reminds people there's a human behind it, I think, sometimes.
And what's it? So kind of like thinking about, again, young artists who are kind of developing their techniques and their skills. Is there anything that, like advice-wise, what kind of advice would you give to the up-and-coming artists?
It's a tough one because I think it's different for every artist, and your journey, it sounds really lame and I hate the word journey, but like your journey is always going to be different to another artist. And I think a lot of people, especially now that Instagram's such a thing,
they think that's a one-way ticket.
Yeah, and it's just so easy to get wrapped up in what other people are doing and worry that maybe you're not doing the same. I think for me a big one is don't necessarily worry about originality. If you, like, just get on with what you want to do, keep like working towards it. I'd say research is a really big one. I think a lot of things that kind of make people almost trip at the first hurdle is a lack of research. So you may be doing the most amazing drawings or whatever, but like if there's no research behind it and no like sort of reason to be doing it, you kind of straight away have become almost like a commercial artist who's just doing like a
reproduction.
I'm trying really hard not to say anything like negative, because all art is valid. It's just that thing of like, I certainly don't want people to be like, oh well, he hates sketch artists, because that's it's kind of that thing of like, I think you've just got to do what you are happy doing and just make sure you back it up with like research. And
you seem to have a really strong work ethic as well. You produce seemingly a lot or on a daily basis, but or not on necessarily. Maybe you can just say that.
I mean, like certainly, like when I've got an exhibition on or like a brief or a project on the go, I do get a bit obsessed with it, and I'll try to make sure I've got like dedicated sketchbooks and versions upon versions and like proofs. And
so you'd rather
anything around it, like I'll end up doing like maybe a word that I get obsessed with for it, like and it becomes a bit of an obsession where you've got like every element you could possibly have to do with that project, and then in the final thing it's like that's it coming together. And that is very research driven, that work ethic.
So what you're saying, you create as many different forms of that idea as you can think of, and then you kind of narrow it down until you have that core.
Sort of, yeah. I've always had a bit of a problem with keeping bad things in my sketchbook, and even now I work a lot on iPad, which means it's even harder to keep bad drawings, because you just literally undo the mark, and and that's something which I think, this is like where we're talking earlier about the risk thing. That is where I'm risking becoming too comfortable at the moment, is the old undo button. But anyway, I think that is important, just to sort of have that visual explosion of your thought and then rein it in. I think the wider you can go at first, and the more focused towards, like, what depends what you're trying to achieve, I guess. But for me, I
think that's good advice.
Range, and and I would say as well, as much as I say don't worry about being original, don't straight up copy.
Yeah, of course.
It is, and that's not like an ego or like a copyright thing. That's literally just for your own peace of mind. It obviously everybody does like drawing.
I think when you're a kid, you learn how to kind of copy stuff, don't you? And hopefully,
a lot of the time that's how they teach GCSE, A-level art. Anyway, it's like you pick an artist and you reproduce their work, and then you do it you do something that you like in maybe the same style. At least that's how I was taught. And I think there is a lot of merit in that. And you look at illustrators, a lot of illustration is based on, you might get really into tattoo art, so you're drawing your own version of these tattoo arts. But I think what I mean by that is, it's not necessarily don't copy. It's kind of like
try and bring your own something to it.
Keep it your own. Yeah, I think it's very easy with things like Instagram and stuff like that to be like, well, they're doing well doing that, I'll just do that.
Yeah.
And
before you know it, everything's kind of that narrow kind of.
Yeah, you see it a lot with certain universities and stuff like that as well. Like you'll see that like maybe a certain art school has a house style of what they consider good, or like a certain art studio may have a type of art that is the only sort of art they seem to produce and stuff like that. And certainly not a bad thing, but it's just good to keep your awareness open to like other options, I guess. And
so I usually ask people like if there's any particular artist, well, especially during lockdown, I found that I kind of stumbled across these different artists, whether they were musicians or painters or whatever. A lot of people were putting stuff out there, so it was easy to find new people. Was there anyone that you've either found during this lockdown period or that you would just recommend anyway, and also like to continue that, is there any books that you've read either recently or in the past that kind of have shaped the way you either think or you do your art, or
I'll start with the book one. So a big book for me was recommended by Jason, actually, and that was Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy.
Okay.
And he recommended it to me after the exhibition I did when my neck was broken, because the work kind of merged space and cowboys and the West and America and all these things. And I read the book and was like, that's the picture I just did. Like, it's crazy, And I've recommended the book loads of times now. You've got to stick with it because his writing style, I don't know if, people who've read his work before might know, but he doesn't use much punctuation.
Okay, so you got
the best way to put it is he writes as if he's telling you it.
That's quite nice sometimes. In a way, you just have to be used to it.
It does take a while. You've got to get used to, like, it'll be like the kid, it'll be like something, 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 said the kid, with no speech marks or whatever. It may not even say said the kid. It would just be a word and then a repetition. And it took me a while, but then when I got there, I was like, I love this.
Okay, that's cool.
It's like having a conversation with him. It's really nice. That, and I for my dissertation when I was at uni, I read John Berger, The Way of Seeing, or The Art of Seeing. I can't remember what the name is, but that I'd recommend for literally any artist. It's just to help you navigate your own way of deciphering artwork. It gives you that tool of like looking at something properly and being able to make an opinion without bias, I guess.
Okay.
I'd say that's pretty important. Yeah, I like a lot of coffee table books. I like a good just visual. There's actually a book company I love called Counterprint.
Okay, not heard of them.
And they do a lot of like graphic design compilations from around the world. So I bought the Japan one first, and then I've now got like a fat stack of like 5 of them. That's like
Japan seems to be something that influences you as well. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I went to Japan last year, and it just completely blew my mind. Like everything about it was just amazing. Like I literally cannot talk about how good it was enough. And I've always loved Hokusai and stuff like that, and Hiroshige, but it was just going there and seeing why those. You see like pictures of Japan, and you're like, oh my god, it looks beautiful. But being there it's just the weirdest but most lovely place I've ever been. And I've said this a few times as well about Japan. Like, if you go to France and speak bad French, people will speak English. If you go to Japan and speak bad Japanese, they will encourage you to speak more Japanese.
Yeah, that's true, actually.
They're just so happy that you're making an effort. And, it's such a different culture, because I think whereas we have a lot of negative nationalism in the UK and Europe, it's very like, this is our country, we want our country. In Japan, it's like, this is our country, we want to share our culture with you and for you to enjoy it. It's a completely different take on nationalism than what I've seen. There's no like, this is ours, keep it ours. It's very just cut. They love it if you were like a Westerner walking around in a kimono, as long as you were doing it just to like enjoy. Yeah,
not taking
Japan.
the piss, but actually embracing
like
it.
if you were doing it in an offensive way, as like kind of. But yeah, like they even have shops where you can go in and rent like geisha costumes for women for a day, or like cool. They love if you get into that.
Come get involved type of thing.
Yeah, like all in, like it's a very all in place, which is beautiful.
Oh, that's cool. Well, we kind of skipped that the question about artists. Is there anyone who you would say that you found or you like recently or to look out for?
Yeah, I mean, like, well, he'd hate me saying it, but as always, Jason's always really important. Like his work. Seeing his journey has been really important and helping all of our journeys, I think, regardless if it, I think regardless if his work is what we usually like or whatever, it's still important to have that sort of figurehead that grounds everything and brings these ideas together.
Yeah, definitely agree.
But he's put me on to a few of my favorite artists, like Marcel Zama is a big one for me.
What kind of artist is he?
He's a. It's hard to say what he is anymore. He's like a painter, but his early stuff was very illustrative in style.
Right.
So I got into him when I was doing a lot of work that was inspired by skate illustrators, like all these sort of Ray Pettibon, who did the Sonic Youth album
Okay.
cover, and he did like Black Flag covers. I was really into him, and Jason was kind of like, well, he's good, but there's a kind of more formal guy that was more fine art based who's doing similar stuff. But and they actually work together now, Ray Pettibon and Marcel Zama, so that's quite interesting. But he's kind of always been there. Very like Hiroshige and Hokusai have been recent influences quite a lot, just because of the Japan thing. Bruegel.
Okay.
Bruegel. I never know.
Do you know how to spell it?
It's Bruegel,
okay.
and a lot of the time I probably say things wrong.
I know. Well, a lot of the time I found that like reading books and stuff like that. There's I've just finished reading this series called like War God, and it's all based in South America, and it's like all the Aztecs. But yeah, some of the names of places and people, I'm assuming I'm reading it right, but really I don't have a clue.
Yeah. I'm probably butchering it, but so I've heard Bruegel or Bruegel said many times, and I still don't really know. But either way, Bruegel is a really big one. I love the kind of his depiction of everyday scenes in a way that makes them seem magical.
Okay,
I think is the best.
Cool.
That's a bit romantic. The word magical isn't the right way. But like my favorite painting ever is by him, and that's Hunters in the Snow.
Okay.
And it ticks every box.
Did you say Hunters in the Snow?
Hunters in the Snow, yeah, it just ticks every box. And he's done some weird, wacky stuff that was kind of inspired by Hieronymus Bosch, and it's got the kind of depictions of demons and hell and real, like, it's just, there's something very
the otherworldly, and like I was saying before about having artists that have that kind of that archaic figure almost kind of transcends.
Well, I think again, this all comes back to this visual language thing. Like if there's little icons that you can relate to, you're always going to like a piece of work. Yeah. It sounds weird, but even like there's some painters I really don't like really ones that I know I should, like big names where I'm like, I just hate it. I just can't get into it. But as soon as I find I used to really not like David Hockney's work. But just because I hadn't seen the right David Hockney for me, as soon as I seen the right David Hockney for me, which is I think it's called it's something about Native Americans.
Okay.
And as soon as I seen the little like sort of abstracted totem pole and sort of a guy sitting very stoic with like a feather in his hair, it did it.
I can see that.
I get it now.
I can see that.
And then that led me down the Hockney route, and a lot of the artists I like have almost come from not liking them at first. It's really weird.
Well, how can what's the best way of people kind of like finding you and like seeing some of your work then?
The best one for me is at Will Bertram on Instagram. I do have a website as well, willbertram.com.
And you sell prints there, don't you?
Yeah, I do have a little online shop, but it's basically my Instagram just with a shop, just because you can't sell through, can't sell through Instagram.
Definitely go and check that out.
But anyone locally, like anyone Jersey-based, my work can be found in Cargo, and now their new place, The Yard, at the Jersey Museum, and also Framing and Arts, who's the lovely man that taught me how to frame.
That's cool. We'll put all the I'll put all the links to all of that in the comment section. And I think ideally I'd like to get you to maybe do another design for me for like something maybe we could do for like a t-shirt or something, maybe some kind of cool psychedelic-y type piece.
Yeah, I do like the hat.
Yeah, so do I.
Really
What I was going to do is give all my guests like a hat. So I'll put one next time I see you. Hopefully it won't be too long.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. That'd be cool. And I'm sure it won't be long.
I'm sure it won't be, mate.